information, you have an idea of the list of companies that you want to send to. You need to develop an RFI. And the RFI needs to be, again, simple, effective, efficient. The first thing that you want to do is communicate expectations with the vendors that you're sending these to, and that includes setting deadlines. When I worked at CRO, we were often getting RFIs and RFPs that said, oh, can you get this back to us tomorrow? Well, we always try, but it's not always reasonable, and you want to make sure that you're being reasonable with your vendors. Give them 2 weeks to respond adequately to an RFI, because they need key people to put that together and meet on as well. So the deadlines are important. And then always letting the CRO or the vendor know what are the next steps. When can you expect to hear from us? What will you hear from us? Communication has to work both ways. Remember that you could be dealing with your potential future provider, so you want to set up those good relationships right away, and that starts with the RFI process in joint communication and collaboration. And a word to vendors to keep that in mind as well, that and this has happened, I think we've all probably had it happen, where we've done an RFI or an RFP and it was sometimes not managed very well by the vendor, and they're off the list right away. Right away, why would I want to walk into dealing with a company who can't put a budget together accurately within a 2-week period or something? So those things are important. The face of your contracts people at the vendor sites are important. So some of the key elements as part of the development, the typical self-explanatory stuff with respect to the corporation, the number of employees, but these speak to depth, capabilities, reach, and then you start to get a little bit into the approach to projects. And here's where you want to tailor it to your own needs. What is their project team structure? The flexibility, how can you start to address within an RFI some of the elements of communication and escalation pathways. I always ask in an RFI, what's your escalation pathway? Because at the RFP process, I want to meet those people in different groups that you would escalate, because you don't, it's the whole prenup concept. You don't want to go into a relationship thinking that it's going to have problems. However, you want to be prepared to deal with those problems and ensure they're adequately addressed before you get into that relationship. Are there competitive advantages? Again, speaks to whether or not it's preferred provider, whether it's vendor selection, just single capability, whether or not you can get discounts, risk management, and always get references, and use your own references. Again, back to the colleagues of colleagues. Keeping that with a little grain of salt. So some people may have had one bad experience a few years ago. It could have been project team specific. So don't throw out a vendor because one person might have had a bad experience. So again, with the clear instructions on filling it out, you try to stick to tables, and we'll look at a couple of examples of this. Phrasing questions clearly and providing definitions. Working on the other side, dealing with this, particularly you see this in big pharma, where they've developed their own words for things that they think the rest of the world understands. We did it at big pharma companies that I worked at. Try to remember that the other side of the table, a lead CRA at one company isn't the same as a lead CRA at the other company. And somebody's POP is, nobody might know what a POP is, project operational plan. A lot of people do, so there's different things that don't just assume. Keep definitions. And it's always good to have somebody outside of the selection group or even outside of clinical trials to read it and say, what do you see when you read that question? What does that say to you? Because sometimes we're too close to the processes to be able to effectively communicate what we're looking for. It all seems like a lot of work, but this is the whole part of it. Just keeps getting easier if you do these steps the right way. So you get the basic company information, locations, make sure you find out. There's a lot of companies that have large umbrella organizations, and so they might show you a map that has 150 locations, and you think, wow, that's great, but only 2 of them do clinical trials. So try to make sure that you're getting the level of detail, that it's not just a BD person in Nebraska, that there might actually be an office there if that's what you're looking for. So make sure you try to get beyond or request, specific numbers of who is in the locations. You want to list your services, obviously the ones you'll tailor this to what you want to outsource, thinking also to the future. You may have a few projects coming up that you don't really want to outsource data management, but if you're going through the process anyway, well, why not look at the data management piece, because maybe 2 years down the road you may want to know what, you may, or there may be overload in your group and you have to use those services. So if you're not going to use a service, don't necessarily think about taking it off. The subcontract column is something you need to investigate on very carefully. There are great reasons why it's done. It adds a diversity and an expertise to a team that rounds out a vendor. However, you have to then probe into the management of subcontractors. You have to make sure that there's some cohesiveness, that they work together, how that relationship works, because you don't want to end up where you get given a vendor who isn't actually being managed by the CRO you thought you hired, and then you're stuck managing this other vendor. Or you may want to manage the other vendor. I mean, that again goes back to your own culture, but definitely something that needs to be looked into, evaluated further. This